The sound of engines. Night air. My gate, broken open like it was made of paper. I am standing in my kitchen in Lagos, and my child is asleep 2 rooms away, and there are 4 men in black suits standing in my courtyard. My hands are not shaking. They stopped shaking the day I left Seoul, but my heart is doing something I cannot name. I look through the window and I see him, 5 years older, same jaw, same silence, same man who never told me what he really was until I saw it with my own eyes. I had one job when I escaped. One job. Hide the child, stay invisible, survive. I thought I left this life behind. I thought the distance between Lagos and Seoul was enough to bury a secret. But the Korean mafia just found my child. And the worst part? He is her father. My name is Folasade. And I want to be clear about something before I tell you this story. I was not naive. I was not reckless. I was not a woman who chased dangerous men or confused darkness for depth. I was a financial analyst, good at numbers, good at patterns, good at finding the thing that does not belong. That skill is exactly what started everything. I arrived in Seoul on a Tuesday in March, 27 years old, with a work visa, a carry-on bag, and a job offer from a company called Shin Capital Ventures. On paper, they were a mid-sized private investment firm, clean, registered, audited. I had done my research. I had accepted the offer because the salary was triple what I would earn in Lagos, and because I had spent 3 years watching my ambitions shrink to fit rooms too small for them. Seoul felt like space. My first 6 months were unremarkable. I processed reports. I attended meetings conducted partly in Korean. I learned to bow slightly when entering a room. I learned that certain floors of the building required a badge I was never given. I learned not to ask about them. I was careful. I kept to my lane. And then, in September, I found the anomaly. It was buried in a quarterly transfer record. A number that appeared in 2 separate accounts simultaneously, which is not possible unless someone was deliberately layering transactions. I flagged it, wrote a memo, sent it up the chain to my direct supervisor, a quiet Korean man named Mr. O, who always smiled too tightly. He told me it was a system error. He told me to delete the memo. I deleted the memo. But I did not delete the spreadsheet I had saved to my personal drive. 2 days later, a man I had never seen before walked into my office and closed the door. He did not knock. He sat across from me without being invited, crossed one leg over the other, and looked at me the way people look at things they are deciding whether to keep or discard. He was Korean, late 20s or early 30s, sharp-featured, composed, dressed in a dark suit that was too precise to be casual. His eyes were not unkind, but they were not warm either. They were calculating. "You sent a memo," he said, not a question. "I was told it was a system error," I said. "It was." "Then there's nothing to discuss." A pause. He tilted his head slightly, the way someone does when they are recalibrating. "You deleted the memo." "Yes, but not the file." I did not answer. My silence was its own kind of answer. He looked at me for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not threat, exactly. More like recognition. Like he had expected me to lie and was surprised that I didn't. "My name is Minjae," he said. "I oversee internal compliance for this firm." He was lying. I didn't know that then. "I'm Folasade," I said. "I know." He stood, straightened his jacket. "Delete the file. And Ms. Folasade..." He paused at the door, back still to me. "Your attention to detail is noted. It's a valuable quality, in the right context." Then he left. I sat in my chair for a full minute before I remembered to breathe. He came back. Not the next day. 3 days later. Without announcement, without reason stated, he appeared at the doorway of my office and asked in a tone that gave nothing away whether I had eaten. I had not. We walked to a restaurant 3 blocks from the building. He ordered in Korean without asking me. The food arrived, sundubu-jjigae, soft tofu, and broth and heat, and for 20 minutes we sat in something that was not quite silence and not quite conversation. He asked where I was from in Nigeria. I told him Lagos. He asked what Lagos was like. I told him loud and alive and exhausting and home. He listened the way people rarely listen. Like he was storing it. I asked him nothing about himself. Even then, I understood that asking Minjae questions was a language he did not speak. The weeks that followed were strange in a way I cannot fully explain. He was not always there. But when he was, and he was there more than made any professional sense, the air in a room changed. I noticed. I tried not to notice. He never flirted. He never said anything that could be interpreted as interest. He asked precise questions. He listened. Sometimes he stood in my doorway and read documents while I worked, as though my office had simply become a place he could think. The women in the office watched. I heard whispers. Shin Min-jae, the second son, the dangerous one, the one you don't look at too long. I heard the name Shin connected to his and filed it away without yet understanding its full weight. I told myself this was nothing. I told myself I was an analyst. I read numbers, not people. But there was one afternoon in October when he stayed late, later than usual, and the building had emptied, and he came to my office and sat across from me and said, without looking up from his phone, "You don't seem afraid of me." "Should I be?" I asked. He looked up then, and something in his expression, just for a second just beneath the control, looked almost tired, almost human. "Most people are," he said. "Most people probably have better reasons than I do," I answered. He almost smiled. It was barely anything, but I caught it. And that was the moment I understood I was in trouble. I didn't know then that the man sitting across from me was not a compliance officer. I didn't know then that the building we worked in had a basement that never appeared on any floor plan. I found out, just not soon enough. There was an evening in November that I have replayed in my mind more times than I can count. Not because it was the most dramatic night. Not because of what came after, though what came after would reshape everything. I replay it because it was the last night I felt like myself. Fully myself. Before fear, before flight, before 5 years of carrying a secret alone. Minji had asked me to attend a dinner. He framed it professionally, a client gathering, my presence useful as part of the firm's international profile. I wore a deep green dress. I did not ask myself why I had chosen the one that fit the best. The dinner was at a private restaurant in Gangnam. The other guests were polished, quiet, the kind of wealthy that does not need to announce itself. I played my role. I spoke when spoken to. I smiled correctly. But all evening, I was aware of Min-jae, sitting across the table watching the room with that habitual surveillance, occasionally catching my eye and holding it for exactly 1 second longer than was professional. When the dinner ended, the other guests left. I moved to find my coat. Min-jae appeared beside me. "Walk with me," he said. We walked. The streets of Gangnam at night have a kind of cold beauty. The lights were sharp and the air was cold, and Min-jae walked with his hands in his pockets and for a long time said nothing. Then he said, "Tell me something true." I thought about it. "I'm tired," I said. "Not tonight, in general. I came to Seoul to build something, and I think I've been building something that doesn't belong to me." He was quiet. Then, "What would belong to you?" "I don't know yet. Something I chose." Another pause. Then he said, and his voice was quieter than I had ever heard it, "I've never chosen anything in my life." I looked at him. He was looking straight ahead. "Everything I am," he said, "was assigned." I did not ask what he meant. I think I already sensed that the answer would be something I could not unknow. We ended up at his apartment. I want to say it was complicated, that I deliberated. It wasn't complicated. I had been deliberating for 2 months. The decision had already been made somewhere underneath all my careful logic. What I remember, the city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows, his hands, which were always so controlled, going still for the first time. The way he looked at me, not like something to be assessed, but like something he could not afford to want and had run out of reasons to resist. I remember thinking, this man carries something heavy, something old, something that will outlast both of us. I remember thinking, I don't care. Fade to black. I woke at 2 a.m. to an empty bed. I could hear his voice somewhere in the apartment, low, controlled, speaking Korean. A phone call. I lay in the dark and told myself this was the part where I stayed still and waited and pretended to be asleep, and let the night be what it was without asking it to be more. But I was thirsty, and his apartment was unfamiliar. I got up. I moved through the dark hallway toward the kitchen. Wrong turn. I found a door, open, just barely, light leaking from below. Stairs. Don't go down. I know. I know I should not have. But the body moves before the mind gives permission sometimes. The body is curious in ways the mind has the sense to suppress. I went 3 steps down, just 3. And through a gap in the door at the bottom, I saw enough. A man in a chair. 2 men in black standing over him. The stillness that follows violence, not the stillness before it. And Minjae, standing to the side with his back to me, his posture exactly the same as always, speaking quietly into his phone as though none of it was happening. As though it was ordinary. I went back up the stairs without making a sound. I found my clothes, my shoes, my bag. I did not leave a note. There was nothing to write. I walked out of that apartment and I did not look back. I told myself, you are safe now. You got out before it was too late. 3 weeks later, standing in a pharmacy in Lagos, I understood that some doors cannot be closed by simply walking through them. Some doors follow you. When I landed back in Lagos, I told no one what I had seen. Not because I was protecting Minjae. I want that to be clear. I was protecting myself. I had seen what happened to people in that basement. I understood that speaking was not courage, it was a death sentence. And I had not survived 27 years to die for a man who had looked me in the eye and never once told me the truth about himself. I resigned from Shin Capital Ventures via email. I cited a family emergency. I expected consequences. A call, a visit, something. Nothing came. Whether that was Minjae's doing or simply the arrogance of powerful men who assume they don't need to chase what was never theirs, I didn't know and I didn't wait to find out. I came home to Lagos. I slept for 3 days. I told my mother I was fine. I noticed the signs and dismissed them. I was stressed. My body was reacting to upheaval. I had crossed 16 time zones and left behind a version of my life without ceremony. Of course I was not well. But the second week became the third week, and the symptoms did not stop. I went to Dr. Bello. He had been my family doctor since I was 15. His office smelled of antiseptic and old paper and something constant that I always associated with truth. He ran tests. He was quiet for too long after looking at the results. Folisade, he said finally. When did you last have a cycle? I counted backward. My mouth went dry. There's a heartbeat, he said. He turned the monitor toward me. Faint, very early, but it's there. I did not cry in his office. I thought about the day, 8 years before, when a different doctor had told me, gently, clinically, with the particular kindness that people use when delivering information designed to end something, that due to the condition of my uterus, the likelihood of my carrying a pregnancy to term was very low. Not impossible. Low. I had spent years absorbing that word. Low. I had reshaped my plans around it. I had grieved quietly. I had made peace. The kind of peace that is not peace, but is simply the place you arrive when grief exhausts itself. And now, a heartbeat. 8 weeks. Mine. I cried in my car, alone, for a very long time. Then I drove home. I made myself rice and stew because my mother always said you think better when you've eaten. I sat at my kitchen table with the ultrasound printout in front of me, and I thought clearly and practically about every angle of what I was facing. I was pregnant by a man I had known for 2 months. A man who ran what I now understood was a criminal organization. A man whose family had invited me to a dinner months before the night I left. A gathering where his mother, Mama Shin, had looked at me across the table with the particular coldness of a woman deciding whether something was useful. Where she had said, in front of guests, in front of her son, loudly and without embarrassment, that she had researched my background and understood I had a medical condition, and that whatever her son's interest in me was, she wanted him to understand he would never get children from a woman like me. A barren woman, she called me. An empty vessel. Minjae had said nothing. He had looked at the table. I had smiled. I had finished my tea. I had gone home that night and told myself it did not matter because it was nothing. Because I was nothing to him and he was nothing to me. Now I was holding the evidence that his mother was wrong. That the doctor from 8 years ago was wrong. That my body had chosen this moment, with this man, to prove every verdict wrong. The decision did not take long. Not because it was easy, it was not easy, but because it was clear. I would not contact Minjae. I would not return to Seoul. I would not place myself or my child within the reach of the Shin syndicate. The woman who called me barren would never know she was wrong. The man who stood in a basement at 2 a.m. with other people's blood on his hands would never know he had a daughter. I would raise this child in Lagos, in safety, in daylight. I would give her a quiet life. I would give her me, and only me. 5 years passed. Her name was Adaola. She had my nose and her father's eyes, the same watchful stillness, the same way of looking at something for longer than necessary, as though she was storing it for later. She was 4 years old, and she already spoke in full sentences and asked questions that made adults pause. She had never known danger. She had never heard the word Shin. She had never asked about her father because I had given her the only answer a 4-year-old needed. You are loved. You are enough. We are home. For 5 years, that was the whole truth. And then the car arrived. Black. No plates. Parking slowly in front of my gate on a Tuesday evening in March. 5 years exactly since I had first landed in Seoul. I was in my kitchen. Adaola was in her room with her crayons and her cartoons. I saw him before he stepped fully out of the car. The height, the posture, the particular stillness that had once made an entire room quiet. Minjae.
안녕, 여러분. Before you continue, if this story touched something in you, you should know I didn't tell everything yet. The complete version has 20 full audio episodes. No interruptions, no ads. Just the story, the emotions, and the moments I couldn't fit in here. If you scan the QR code on your screen, or tap the link in the pinned comment, to continue listening right now.
5 years older. And he was looking at my house with the expression of a man who has been looking for something for a very long time. He found it. I had one advantage. Just one. He didn't know what she looked like yet. And I had approximately 30 seconds before that changed. I had 30 seconds. I used them. I walked to Adola's room. I opened the door calmly, because she reads my face the way I read spreadsheets, and panic would have transferred instantly. Sweetheart, I said, go to Auntie Kemi's room and play there until I call you. Take your crayons. She looked at me. Those eyes. His eyes. Why? Because I said so, my love. Go. She gathered her crayons without argument. She always knows when the tone means now, and disappeared down the hallway. I exhaled. Then I walked to the front door and opened it before he could knock. Minjae stood on my doorstep in Lagos, Nigeria, in a dark coat that was wrong for the heat, with 2 men standing at the gate behind him. Kwan I recognized even after 5 years, stone-faced and immovable. And he looked at me with an expression I had spent a long time trying to forget. Not cold, not threatening, relieved. That was the most dangerous thing about it. Folisade, he said. My name in his mouth, after 5 years, felt like a key turning in a lock I thought I had welded shut. You need to leave, I said. I've been looking for you for 4 years. And you found me. Now leave. He didn't move. I'm not here to hurt you. I know what you are, Minjae. I saw what you are. That night, I saw. I kept my voice level. The street was quiet. The evening air was thick and warm and completely indifferent to the fact that my entire world was tipping. I ran because I had to. I stayed gone because I was right to. Something crossed his face. A fracture in the composure. I know what you saw. Then you know why I'm standing here asking you to go. I also know, he said quietly, that you left without telling me something. The silence between us was enormous. I did not answer. His eyes moved, just briefly, just for a half second, to the window behind me. The sound had traveled without me noticing. Small footsteps. A child's hum, faint through the wall. He heard it. I watched him hear it. And I watched something happen in his face that I had never seen there before. Not in 2 months of Seoul. Not in any version of Minjae I had cataloged and filed and tried to forget. Something broke open. Something raw and unguarded and completely human. He looked back at me. How old? He said. His voice was barely sound. Go home, Minjae. How old is she? I said nothing. But my silence had always been its own kind of answer, and he had known that from the very first day. He closed his eyes for 1 second, opened them. I'm not leaving Lagos. The days that followed were the most exhausting of my life, and I had survived giving birth alone in a Lagos hospital at midnight, so that is not a small statement. Minjae did not force his way in. He did not threaten. He did not send Kwan to my door with ultimatums. He simply remained. A black car parked a careful distance from my gate. A man who had once commanded rooms full of dangerous people now sitting in the heat of Lagos, waiting, because waiting was the only option I had left him. I arranged for Adaola to stay with my mother for 3 days. My mother asked no questions. She is a woman who has always understood that some explanations come later. On the second evening, I let Minjae into my house. Not because I forgave him, not because I trusted him, because Kwon had quietly informed my neighbor, who informed me, that Mama Shin knew where I was. If she was coming, I needed to understand what Minjae wanted before she arrived. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, the same table where I had once stared at an ultrasound printout and made the decision that changed everything. And he looked at the photographs on my wall. Adaola at 1 year old, at 2, at 3, her school picture from last month. He looked at each one for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, but only barely. Her name, he said. Adaola. What does it mean? The crown brings honor. I watched him. I chose it before she was born. I chose it because she deserved a name that had nothing to do with where she came from or what she almost wasn't. He absorbed that. She's healthy? She's perfect. He nodded slowly. His jaw was tight. I would have... Don't. My voice was sharp. Don't tell me what you would have done. You don't get that sentence, Minjae. You were never given the chance to do anything, because I made a decision in a pharmacy in Lagos with a positive test in my hand and the memory of a man standing in a basement at 2 a.m. while someone else bled. That was the information I had. I used it. He was silent for a long time. You were right, he said finally. That was not what I expected. To run, he said. What you saw, you were right to run. I can't ask you to unsee it. I can't ask you to pretend it didn't happen. I'm not here to rewrite the past. He looked at me. I'm here because she exists, and because my family now knows she exists, and because whatever I am, whatever you rightfully think of me, I am the only thing standing between my mother and your daughter. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. His mother was already moving. He slid a single photograph across my table. It was taken from a distance, a long lens, a professional job. It was my daughter, at her school gate, this morning. She was there before I was, he said. My mother sent someone first. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Adaola in her yellow school uniform, her backpack shaped like a bear. Her hand raised toward a friend just outside the frame, laughing at something, unaware, completely unaware. The next morning, I brought her home from my mother's. I held her longer than usual when she ran to me, and she squirmed and said, "Mama, you're squishing." And I laughed because the alternative was falling apart. I had told Minjae, 3 days. I would give him 3 days to help me understand what we were dealing with and to figure out a plan. After that, I reserved the right to disappear again. He agreed. He was staying at a hotel nearby. Kwon remained outside my gate. Not as a threat, Minjae said, but as a warning system. I did not love that distinction, but I understood it. Mama Shin arrived on the second day. She did not call ahead. Of course she didn't. I heard the gate, heard Kwon's voice, sharp, surprised, and then the front door opened and she walked into my home the way she had always moved through every room, like it belonged to her by right, and everyone else was simply occupying her space on borrowed time. She was older than I remembered. The silver in her hair had completed its work. But her posture was identical. The rigid, blade-straight spine of a woman who had never once apologized for existing. Behind her, 2 of her own men. And behind them, Minjae, who had arrived within minutes of my frantic message, and whose expression when he walked in behind his mother was something I had never seen on him before. Fear. Real, quiet, controlled fear. He was afraid of her. That told me everything I needed to know about how deep this went. Mama Shin looked at me across my own living room. So, she said in Korean accented English she chose deliberately. She spoke it better than she let on. The girl who ran. This is my home, I said. You weren't invited. Mothers don't need invitations. Her eyes moved around the room, landed on a drawing stuck to the refrigerator. Adaola's art, the way she always drew people with giant smiles and stick arms reaching outward. Where is she? She is not here. A pause. Don't lie to me, child. I'm not your child. I stepped forward. And she is not your grandchild in any way that means you have a right to stand in this house. Something moved in Mama Shin's expression. Not anger. She was too composed for simple anger. It was something colder. Contempt and calculation wearing the same face. I called you barren, she said, almost conversationally, in front of everyone. I said you were an empty vessel. No use to my family, no use to my son. She tilted her head. And yet, I said, I was wrong. Yes, you were. I respect that. She said it without warmth, the way people say things that are true without being kind. That child carries Shin blood. She is heir to. She is my daughter. My voice did not shake. I had been saving this voice for years. I had been building it in the quiet of Lagos evenings, in the dark hours when Adaola slept, and I sat with the weight of every secret I carried. This voice had been waiting. She carries my name. She goes to school 2 kilometers from this house. She has friends and a grandmother who makes her jollof rice on Sundays and a bedroom painted yellow because that is her favorite color. She does not know what your family is, and she will not. Mama Shin's eyes narrowed. Minjae? No. His voice came from behind her, quiet, absolute. She turned, slowly. He was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room. I noticed his hands, open at his sides, deliberate, visible. No, he said again. You would defy me, she said softly. For this woman. Not for her, he said. For the child. A beat. And yes, for her. What happened next I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Because I had kept a secret for 5 years. A smaller one. A secret within the secret. The night I saw what happened in that basement, before I left, before I ran, I had taken something. From a desk in the hallway, without thinking, without planning, the way the hands move when the mind is too overwhelmed to calculate. A hard drive. Small. Silver. The kind that accountants and analysts recognize immediately. I had taken it to Lagos. I had locked it in a safety deposit box. I had never opened it. I opened it 3 days ago when Minjae's car first arrived outside my gate. The contents were exactly what I feared they were. Financial records, movement records, names, transactions, evidence of crimes that went back 15 years and reached all the way to the Shin matriarch herself. I placed the copy I had made on the table between us. Mama Shin looked at it. Then she looked at me. If anything happens to me, I said, or to my daughter, or to anyone I love, that information goes to every authority that has jurisdiction over every country on that file. I met her eyes. I'm not a woman who makes threats. I am a financial analyst. I make contingency plans. This one has been in place for 4.5 years. The room was absolutely silent. Minjae was staring at me. Something in his expression I could not fully read. Shock, yes. But underneath it, something else. Something that looked almost like awe. Mama Shin looked at the file for a long time. Then she looked at her son. And for the first time since she had walked into my home, she said nothing. She left without her grandchild. She left without a victory. She left with the very clear understanding that the woman she had called barren and empty and useless had spent 5 years quietly building the most effective weapon available, information, and had aimed it with absolute precision. When her car disappeared around the corner, Minjae turned to me. 4.5 years, he said. I made the copy 6 months after Adaola was born, when I realized the safety deposit box wasn't enough. You never planned to use it. I planned to never need to. I looked at him. But I was always ready. He exhaled. The long, slow exhale of a man releasing something he has been holding for years. I'm done, he said. With all of it. I've been trying to find a way out for 3 years. I've been building a case, quietly, carefully, that would let me walk away without a war. He looked at me. Your file might be what makes that possible. That file is not yours, I said clearly. It is mine, my insurance, my daughter's safety net. I know, he nodded. I'm not asking for it. I'm asking you, when the time comes, and it will come, to trust me. Just enough. Just once. I didn't answer him, but that night, for the first time in 5 years, I left the front door unlocked. I don't fully know why. I think I do, though. I did not introduce them immediately. I want to be honest about that because I think it matters. I was not swept up in a romantic conclusion. I was a woman who had built a careful, quiet life for her daughter, and I did not dismantle it overnight because a man I had once loved showed up after 5 years with good intentions and a suit too warm for Lagos. I took 3 more weeks. I watched him during those 3 weeks the way I watch numbers, looking for the place where the pattern breaks, looking for the thing that does not belong. He rented a small apartment nearby. Not intrusive. He did not appear at my gate uninvited. He sent messages, brief, careful, never demanding. He sent one for Adaola, a drawing of a turtle on a napkin, folded into an envelope, because he had seen a photograph in my living room of her current favorite animal and filed it the way he filed everything. She held it for a long time when I gave it to her. Who drew this? A friend, I said. She studied it. They drew his legs wrong. Turtles have 4 legs, not 3. You could tell them that, I said. She considered this very seriously. Okay, she said. I told her on a Sunday morning over breakfast, while the Lagos light came through the kitchen window, the way it does in the dry season. Gold and clean and completely honest. I did not tell her everything. She is 4 years old. She does not need everything yet. I told her that her father was a man I had known in a faraway city, that he had not been with us because of complicated things that grown-ups sometimes cannot fix in time, that he was here now, that she never had to feel anything she didn't want to feel, that she could take as long as she needed. She ate her eggs, thought about it. Is he nice? She asked. I thought about every version of Minjae I had known. The man in the office, the man who listened like he was storing it, the man at 2 a.m. in a basement, the man on my doorstep with 5 years of searching on his face, the man who drew a turtle on a napkin from memory. He's trying to be, I said. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. But I want to keep my name. I stared at her. What? Adaola. I want to keep it, in case he has a different one. I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep and catches you off guard. You are keeping your name, my love. That was never in question. Good. She went back to her eggs. Then I'll meet him. I did not expect what happened. Minjae arrived at my house that afternoon. I had messaged him. He had read it and responded with a single word. Coming. He came to the door alone, without Quan, without the coat, without the armor of his usual composure. He looked, if I am being precise, terrified. Adaola opened the door before I could. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she said, "You drew his legs wrong. Turtles have 4. He blinked. Something in his face shifted completely. The calculation, the control, the careful composure. All of it simply fell away.
If you made it to the end, you already understand this isn't just another story. What you watched here is only a fragment. The full experience lives in 20 complete audio episodes, carefully told, with every detail, every emotion, every turning point. There are no ads, no interruptions, and nothing was removed like it is on YouTube. You can listen anytime on your phone with total privacy, inside the members-only area. Scan the QR code on your screen now, or tap the link in the pinned comment.
Replaced by something so unguarded it almost hurt to watch. You're right, he said. I'll fix it. Okay, she said. She stepped aside to let him in. Do you want some rice? Grandma made too much. He looked at me over her head. His eyes were bright in a way I had never seen. And I had seen many things in those eyes over the years, but I had never seen this. Yes, he said quietly. I'd like that. I am not going to tell you that the fear disappeared overnight. It did not. The syndicate does not untangle in a season. The process Minjae had been quietly building, the cooperation with certain authorities, the evidence he had been compiling, the slow and dangerous work of dismantling something that had taken decades to build, would take time. Real time. Some of it uncertain, some of it dangerous. Mama Shin did not become a different person. She retreated. She calculated. She waited. Because women like her always wait. And I kept my file. I kept my contingency plan. I kept my own name on my own accounts, and my own emergency bag packed in the back of my wardrobe, because I am a woman who has learned that love and preparedness are not opposites. But Minjae sat at my kitchen table and ate my mother's rice. and listened to Adaola explain the correct anatomy of sea turtles with the same focused attention he had once turned on offshore accounts. And something in the architecture of my chest rearranged itself around that image. He was not the man I had idealized. He was not clean. He was not uncomplicated. He was a man trying to become something different than what he was made to be. Slowly, imperfectly, without guarantee. I understood that. More than most people might. We had both been trying to become something different than what we were assigned. 3 months later, on a Saturday, Adaola reached up and took his hand without asking while we walked near the water. She just took it. The way children do things. Without ceremony, without conditions, without the long deliberation that adults layer over everything. He looked down at her hand in his, then he looked at me. And I thought, this is not the ending of the story. This is the most dangerous beginning. I thought, I know that. I am choosing it anyway. I thought my daughter, who was told she would never exist, is holding the hand of the man everyone told me would never change. We are a family built from impossibilities. Maybe that is exactly what makes us real. Final video ending. Comment bait. She called me barren in a room full of people, and I stood there and smiled and said nothing. 5 years later, I sat in my own kitchen and watched that same woman walk out of my house with nothing. But here is the thing I keep returning to. The thing I cannot resolve even now, even with Adaola's laughter filling every room. Minjae knew what his family was. He knew, and he stayed. Until he didn't. At what point does someone become responsible for the life they were born into? And at what point do we stop giving them the chance to leave it? If you were me, would you have come back to the same city as the man who never told you the truth about himself? And if Adaola one day asks for the full story, every part of it, the basement and the blood and the years of silence, do you think she deserves to hear it? 2 weeks after that Saturday at the waterfront, a letter arrived at my gate. No stamp, no return address. Handwritten, the kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who learned to write in another era, when letters still carried the full weight of intention. I recognized it before I opened it. Mama Shin writes in a very particular hand. Inside was a single line. The girl has an uncle, and he is nothing like his brother. I sat with that letter for a long time. Minjae doesn't know I received it. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to tell him. Some doors I've learned don't announce themselves. They just open.